Okay then, how do we do this?
Why don't you just start,
Well, I
Ryan?
think we'd probably start with introductions, excuse me. Tim, aka B-Man here. We have Nick, aka Blamo. We have Jeff, aka Nose. And I am Brian, aka Rome.
Hello, FORTS world.
Well, good day, FORTS fans, as we say.
G'day, mate.
Jeff, you're actually Canadian, as I recall, right?
Yes. Don't I sound Australian? I'm technically Australian.
If you squint, perhaps.
Okay, so we're going through the latest set of patch notes, which are numerous here. And we're not going to try to go through every individual line item because, Tim does eventually need to sleep at some point. But to hit some major topics here, we're starting with multi-level water. I think that's probably the biggest addition for everyone involved here.
That sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, if we could just sort of talk about, I guess, what went into it, and maybe a little bit about when you were planning creating high seas, which I know, Blamo, that was your brainchild, essentially, which was some artwork that turned into a 2-3 year process.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so basically came up with the high seas thing and a water level, and we went with the single water level, and Tim knocked that out pretty quickly, and so got into designing. But of course, it sort of dictated just having one water level. The what we could do as far as design of the maps went, and there's plenty of designs to go with that, and so that was fine for the campaign side of it. But when we got to the multiplayer side, realized pretty quickly that you end up with a bit of sort of traffic jam at either side of the map, whereas all these boats are backed up against each other. And so Tim worked out a way of doing the multi-level water, which then allowed for more and varied multiplayer maps, which hopefully have gone down well with the community. Tim, do you want to tell us about the tech side of that?
Yeah, sure. So, a single water level is quite easy to do. You can just determine the depth of the structure just by comparing it with the fixed level. But with multi-level, we had to separate areas, if you like. So we had to just make an array of water levels and then figure out where each node was within that space to determine the depth. We did have a little bit of forward thinking just after the launch of High Seas to support that horizontal position in the scripting API. So not a lot of change had to happen there. But internally we had to figure out a way of specifying the different water levels. So I went through a few options, but the best was to basically take the water level off marked blocks in the map editor. So the water level is just read off from each node and plugged into the game. And so we can work out the depth and therefore apply a different course on each node based on its position in the map. We made maps that were fairly simple, that might have had 6 or 8 different water levels, but immediately the testers started putting diagonals in and seeing if they could make waterfalls and things. So that immediately stressed the system, and I had to make a little bit of an adjustment in that it now takes levels off diagonal blocks as well as flat ones. So yeah, it was a fun experience making that one.
As soon as you let people get their hands on it, you really can't tell what to expect. Now, you said that you planned some of this ahead of time and put some things early in to plan for the future. How do you sort of decide what features to include when you're launching something like a DLC versus what can maybe wait a little bit and what is a future project?
I guess it's done on a case-by-case basis. We have to decide what the most important thing is to deliver the experience. And in this case, we could live without multi-level water. I think it was probably something that we were thinking about right at the end, or maybe just after launch, I can't remember, but it wasn't necessary for the campaign, and it wasn't necessary for multiplayer, at least not initially. So yeah, it got put on the back burner because invariably when you're launching a product like this, you just run out of time. We just couldn't do everything we wanted. So that was just one of the things that we didn't do.
I think some of it comes down to as well needing to get certain things in place and fixed. So then the design of product can be made. Obviously, if you design everything and then you change something halfway through, you end up with possibly a bunch of editing, which takes a bunch of time, or lost work. And of course, you might end up with delaying the project for another 6-12 months. So yeah, there's certainly sort of things in there with every iteration of the game that we were like, that would be nice to have in there, but we got to get cracking essentially.
Yeah, do a few things well is a good philosophy, I think. When it comes to games, you can't spread yourself too thin, and we can we've shown that we can deliver things over time. So yeah, that's what we did in this case.
We do appreciate the refinements that come in. I know the community especially, and how, for example, there were some performance optimizations that also made this maybe more practical than it would have been to do at launch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've brought on a new programmer actually, and he found some optimizations to do with water physics. So that made this more palatable, I suppose. And we know the community likes to push things further than we do in terms of map design. So it was essential, really. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've probably covered multi-level water. See, the next thing on the list here is the runway upgrade. And obviously, anytime you introduce a new game mechanic, in this case, for instance, ammunition, there's going to be some balancing, and there's going to be, some trial and errors. You find out what people can come up with. So I guess how do you sort of keep track of the moving target that is balanced in Forts? I know, Jeff, you've mentioned that you like your spreadsheets, and you've been involved with games that have just copious numbers of them. Is that something you do with Forts, or is it a little more like you just know this game so well, having been from the beginning?
I think when it comes to managing the balance, you see a lot of different opinions online, on the Forts Discord of what's too powerful, what's not powerful enough. And if you kept on reacting to that, nobody would ever get the feel for what this game feels like, because it's constantly changing. I know working with Nick and Tim, they take the balance very seriously, and it's this very delicately balanced thing, and if you nudge it the wrong way, the knock-on effect is huge. So I think quite simply, from my perspective, it's just very considered choices, very careful selecting of ideas and applying these balances very subtly, very carefully. I'm sure these guys could elaborate on it better than I am.
Yeah, Tim, I know, for example, that a lot of people are surprised when they dig into the code to find out that there's a lot of numbers that seem random and are very, very specific. For example, the health of bracing versus the damage on individual weapons, and how there's an exact number of shots that these add up to. And could you sort of talk about what it's like trying to tweak this after the fact?
Yeah, it's difficult. I guess I just try to think about what the role of the weapon is and figure out roughly how much damage it should do per projectile. It's there are a lot of moving parts, and what I tend to do is take opinions and then form my own based on those and my own intention of the design, and then just make small changes. If you make large changes, you tend to overshoot, and that can really muck things up. Yeah, you make a small change and observe it and learn from it, and try to apply that learning to future changes as well. But yeah, the runway upgrade was a significant one. Most of that motivation came from players complaining that the ammo was too slow to build, but we didn't want to just drop the construction time, as it would just sort of cheapen the whole thing. So we decided to make an upgrade which would cost a fair amount of resources and take a long time to build as well. So that would gate the escalation to this time of the match where you could drop a lot more bombs. Yeah, we got some feedback from the testers as well, but we're still seeing how this plays out in the game.
Yeah, this sort of goes back to there's certain things we want to achieve with certain weapons, and with the runway and the ammo system, we definitely wanted sort of like a sort of build up and then huge sort of overwhelming attack sort of thing. Obviously we could make it so that you could just fire like you can with the rest of the weapons, but we wanted to have this sort of different sort of game mechanic and then different tactic. So we try and make the changes in certain directions with intentions we have, as opposed to necessarily taking the easiest route, or as Tim was saying, reducing the cost or something like that. And then all of a sudden you just reduce the cost, reduce the time build, and all of a sudden you basically just fire like a regular weapon, and we didn't want that. We wanted to maintain its sort of build up and overwhelming firepower feel to it.
So a little more like, say, a carrier out in the real world, traveling from place to place, and then it expends its ordnance, but then it has to return to dry dock and rearm and get repaired.
Yeah, exactly. So you fire like waves of bombers or whatever, as opposed to one at a time, which can easily get picked off. I think initially when we first put it out, people were not necessarily cognizant of the fact that you fire like a wave of jets, like 4 or 5, and like the first one's going to get nailed. So if they only fired one, this is terrible. But if you fire a bunch, eventually, the AI gets overwhelmed and they start getting smashed with the munitions, which ends up being pretty satisfying visually.
Yeah, we were trying to set up a sort of risk-reward system where you would save up your ammunition. You'd have a big carrier full of planes and unleash them. But of course, having all those resources and time invested in ammunition risks an explosion. If one of your planes gets hit, then the whole lot can go up. So there's this question of how much do you store up to unleash, because if you have a really large massing of ammunition, you can wipe out your opponent, but then it'll take a long time and you could have it all wiped out.
Having all that ammo inside the structure sort of really fills the vessel. Without the ammo system, you have like this huge structure, and a lot of it would be empty. Whereas now we got like a lot of it filled with stuff, which basically makes it a floating bomb, and then you get more sort of impressive, physics, explosions, bits sinking, bits getting blown off, that sort of thing. Is sort of all sort of trying to channel it into this aesthetic as well as gameplay. I think the visuals of the game have really marked it out as being different from the previous 2 releases, which has sort of seen its popularity, excel quite a lot. Well,
that does sort of lead us right next into the quality of life improvements here, and the slimline replay HUD. Should you talk a little bit about that, and just looking how it's going to be a little bit different for people, making recordings, replays, and easier for them to share?
Yeah, that was just basically, obviously when you're watching, you want to watch all the action and stuff. Obviously with the regular HUD, you need space for all the buttons and basically to play the game. And with the replay, it's more about what you're looking at, and so we wanted to strip it down. Then it sort of leaves us with a bit more of a cleaner interface for adding stuff later on, for overlays for tournaments, that sort of thing. So it's really sort of a refinement, I think, at least from my side of things.
How do you make sure you keep the essential information while stripping it down to be as minimal as possible?
I think with the replay one, it was looking at it, I realized that there's quite a bit of more space taken up than was necessary. So it was really sort of streamlining and just keeping the essentials less about. Because with the HUD, you want to generate sort of like feel, and it sort of adds to the experience and sort of the immersion. But with the replay, it's a different matter, Yeah, I guess it's different purposes. So I sort of took that into account. I thought the extra real estate was worth the trade-off.
And we do appreciate that, especially as someone who spends a lot of time in the replay viewer.
Yeah.
Okay, Tim, we're going to be back for you for this one for quite a bit, I'm afraid. 64-bit upgrade. So, and again, I cannot ever say this enough. You started work on Forts all the way back in 2003?
Yeah. Yeah, 64-bit wasn't much of a thing back then. It would have been nice to start with that instead of having this rather large update with all the things that went wrong. It's a strange game. I mean, you can build as much as you like and fire as many projectiles as you like, but you can also add unlimited mods on top of each other, and the mods can be quite large. So combined with languages that can take up quite a bit of memory, we just wanted to release the floodgates, I guess, make it so that memory wasn't ever going to be a problem. So we decided to convert to 64-bit, and it had its challenges for sure. It looked pretty solid from the beginning, but once we launched, we found that there were some desyncs caused by some CPUs that would return slightly different results. And we also found someone on a Threadripper CPU that had some things not execute in the same way, so we had to limit the number of threads, and these are all things that stemmed from the 64-bit conversion. But once we figured that all out, I think we're all quite satisfied that we made the decision. It means we can not be so constrained with our content releases in the future, as well as make some improvements to font rendering, which is a particularly memory-intensive task for some of the Asian languages.
So, Jeff, so we expect the multi-gigabyte high-quality audio edition soon?
No promises. No promises.
We're not there already.
There's lots of stuff on my to-do list, though. So, yeah.
And Nick, I know that High Seas it looks beautiful, but did you have any constraints in what you were able to do because of, the lack of memory support, at least for the very, very large maps, for example?
I don't think I really did have that much problem with that side of things. I think it's more sort of like timing feature implementation with what can be designed. Sometimes you have an idea for design and there's a feature that's not implemented just yet. That's more sort of where the restrictions lie. I guess, like Tim was saying, players like to push it more than we do. I guess we sort of like play within the boundaries. We all have like an idea of what we're trying to achieve, and so we make the tech for that and make that possible. And sort of I have a tool set I work with, kind of thing. Whereas the players are more keen on sort of pushing the boundaries, as Tim was saying, and just like adding all the mods and seeing how wacky it can get, and also just the mods they make, or unlimited upgrades, or what was that mod with like just tons and tons of materials. Those ones spring to mind.
Which Well Defended, I think it was called.
That was it. Yeah. So that kind of thing. You see the amount of materials we have in there rarely gets added to, because there's not much room in between those materials to add anything that's not already there. There's enough complexity there to make the game interesting without being too overwhelming. And each time you add something new, you then have to explain it in a tutorial or with tips or whatever to the player. So that's also another consideration. But no, the 64-bit thing helped with memory problems and modding and as I say, fonts and stuff, and was luckily fairly simple to implement as I understand it, right, Tim?
Well, our new programmer handled most of that, but there was the aftermath that I had to clean up. I don't know. It was okay. We did it.
You were following best practices, and that sort of helps keep things under control. And then it gets released to modders who may have a different set of priorities.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing I keep finding is, like, as Nick said, that we come up with an idea and we stay within the boundaries of the idea, and we don't actually have any issues, any technical issues, and then we put the feature out, and then the modders come in and tweak it so that the thing, in the case of the audio, I've made it so I'm expecting the sound to only get triggered once in a while. I don't really have to put any limits to it, but then a modder will come in and make this thing go from 1 barrel to 50 barrels, or it's going to, instead of 1 round a minute, it's going to do, just endless amounts of bullets. And the audio system we use, Fmod, is like, stressed under trying to render all this audio all at once in a single frame. I know in some cases the most memorable was the accelerator technique, with using the portals to cause something to loop. And when that first was put in, it was like triggering the teleport sound, like in and out every frame, and actually it was affecting the audio was actually affecting everybody's frame rate. So yeah, we learned to put in some limitations in there so that that the audio wouldn't break the game. So lesson learned there. Always put limits in there because the modders are kind of crazy.
But they have come up with some amazing things as well.
Well, actually the players have come up with something amazing, because I remember when I first saw my first core swing, and I'm like, what? who in their right mind would actually touch the core? It's like, you don't, it's so delicate, and these guys are swinging it all over the place. It's crazy. That's like, the players are inventing a new way to play the game beyond the way Tim and Nick originally designed it, which is really cool.
Well, you've embraced that. So, Tim, this next section here, the modding changes, you've just sort of cover it broadly. I know you've added a number of functions for them to play around with and see what they come up with.
Yeah, I can't say I remember them all currently, but yeah, we did fix some things and expand functionality. We try to add a few things for modders in each update. It just allows them to push the boundaries just that little bit each time.
So one of the things, just a nice quality of life improvement here, is the mod and map search box, which there is actually a meme Discord that someone had created that was, add a mod search bar. But this is something that's been in the works for a very long time. It's not just that you noticed it last week and now suddenly, like, hey, here we go, now it's in the game.
Yeah, it's something I've wanted to add for a long time. I mean, it's great for the players, of course, but we have a long list of things to sort through ourselves. Say if we're testing for a particular bug with a particular mod, this now allows us to just type in part of the name of that and jump straight to it. Same sort of thing with maps. It just makes sense. Like, the lists have just grown so long that this kind of functionality is essential now.
I guess I should ask, because this is something that you said you've won for a while. A lot of times you don't get to decide exactly what needs to be worked on next because some things are just so critical. For instance, you mentioned crashes and desyncs, of course. But are there any features that you've just said, I want this feature, I'm working on this feature? Probably
all the time. I can't think of any examples, but yeah, often it's more fixes, like something will just irritate me to the point that I just want to fix it on the spot, In an ideal world, I guess I would bounce that off everyone, but yeah. As an independent game developer, I mean, this is your prerogative. This is why. Otherwise, you could just be working for someone else. Yep, that's right. I mean, it gives us freedom, and we're all professionals and can do our jobs, so we're doing our best and trying to make FORTS as good as we can. One of those features that was included with the mod and map search bar is also the lobby map preview, which again is just an amazing quality of life feature. Nick, you've mentioned a couple times that you have to balance features that are nice, that make the game better, that people will like, versus features that, as you say, are sexy and that will attract new players and create more sales, because ultimately that is one of the goals.
Yeah, it's totally a trade-off all the time between new features versus sort of fix, balance, and maintenance. I mean, you can just look back at a sort of history of updates, and some some updates are definitely sexier than others, but then other ones are like got tons of fixes and critical stuff that we needed to go in there, and it's always a sort of weighed up. But there's just an endless list of features and fixes that need doing, and only so many Tims and Nicks and Jeffs in the team, so we have to always have to weigh that up and work out what we want to go in this one, what we want to go in the next one. I mean, some updates are more focused. Let's say like the Commander update we did a couple of years ago, and so we try and sort of package it. And then we had obviously the recent update was like a high seas focus one. 6 months after launch, we added a bunch of extra things in there that I've been wanting to do for a while. After we had a bit of a sort of downtime from crunching to get the original high seas out, that was much needed. So yeah, it's always a trade-off and sort of a balancing act. But on the whole, I think we do a pretty good job. It's always nice to have something that you can make an exciting GIF out of to put into the announcement and on the social medias side of things. So as important as change lists are, no one reads much in games these days. So it's nice to make it visually appealing.
I think I told you, Nick, that the map and mod search bar was going to be sexy, and you disagreed. But I think that might be one of the more popular changes in this update.
Yeah, people loving it, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think that was one of the team names in the last tournament. Was mod search bar was the name of the team.
Yeah.
And that was before the update, by the way.
It was.
Yeah, we got the message on the suggestions channel.
We get the messages as soon as they arrive. It just takes a while to trickle through to the top of the list, So
We need to hire more monkeys.
Yeah, that's right.
And even then, it's not as though it's, again, like you see the message and you go home and you work on it and now it comes out the next day. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I know that there are so many different things in the works right now. Since we're all here, if you would like to announce any of them or just hint at some of them. I know you don't give too many details lest you create expectations here, but just of the many, many things you have going right now.
Well, I mean, the slimline replay HUD is sort of first part of an upgrade we want to do. Yeah, always hesitant to say what we're going to do, because then people say, when is it coming? When's it out? Is it done yet? And this particular feature has already been pushed back. So yeah, I'm not really going to elaborate on, but certain things are sort of put in place in order to facilitate future enhancements. As ever, we got some exciting things coming up in the new year. So stay tuned, sports fans.
Okay, I think that's probably about everything, unless there's something specific you want to mention.
I'd just like to big shout out to our community for being awesome, because we just love seeing what everybody's doing, the creative mods, creative maps, and it's just and the also our testers too. We have a bunch of really dedicated testers who are also members of the community, and they've been really awesome, giving us their time, very generous with their time, playing our the game and testing new features and giving us their feedback. And yeah, I just would like to thank everybody in the community and the testers.
Because there's nothing more gratifying than working on something and having it appreciated. So I think we've got a good relationship with our community, and it's really rewarding as a developer for FORTS. Tim agrees, I can tell.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing about the testers, and also there's a few of those who help with translations, which is absolutely essential when we're making last-minute changes on an update. It just takes too long to go through the translation company, and our testers tend to do a better job since they know the game inside out. So thank you.
Okay, that is the latest patch notes Q&A.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Looking forward to the next one.
And the aforementioned unpromised features.
Yep. Stay tuned.